Hello, parents. Thank you for joining us on our Student Abroad webinar. This is the December 2016 version of the webinar. It's primarily intended for parents of students who are going abroad for the spring 2017 semester, but if you are not one of those parents and you're watching this, you may find some good information as well if your students are considering going abroad in subsequent semesters. My name is Tom Guinan. I'm the Associate Vice President for Operations here at Notre Dame International, joined by my colleagues.
I'm Susan Soyson, and I'm the first full-time risk manager at Notre Dame International. I work primarily on health, safety, and security initiatives. I've been at Notre Dame about 20 years and in NDI as a strategist in about 2013.
Excellent.
And I'm Kathleen Opel. I'm the Director of Study Abroad. We have about 46 programs during the academic year, and I've worked at Notre Dame in Notre Dame International for about 18 years.
Great, thanks. And one thing about all of us that we share in common is that we all have sent or will be sending students abroad on Notre Dame programs. My daughter is going abroad in the spring of 2017, and my son was in Rome last spring, and so this is particularly relevant for me. I am one of you watching this webinar right now. So let's get right into it. Our agenda today will cover a few broad topics. We'll give you an overview on study abroad. We'll focus then on some health and safety items that you as parents should consider, and then as students we've also helped your students prepare for. And then we'll answer some questions that have been submitted to us or that have come up frequently from people in your situation from prior semesters. So in order to get right into it, we'll turn to Kathleen Opel, who will give us an update, an overview on study abroad generally.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk with you. As you can see, we have about 445 undergraduate students studying abroad this next semester, and they're participating in 46 different programs. And these programs range from Amman to Toledo, from Australia to the United Kingdom. So we have people going to a lot of different places. As you can see from the numbers, we have about 282 students who will be participating in a global gateway location. Our global gateways are centers and buildings where the students have classes in conjunction with classes that they take at a local university. These gateway locations are in London, Dublin, Rome, Jerusalem, and Beijing. Our other locations with Notre Dame staff include Santiago, Puebla, Angers, and Sao Paulo. These locations have the staff on site who assist with both curricular and with extracurricular activities, and there is a support system for students. Additionally, we have 131 students who participate in programs in partner institutions or such as an exchange program or a direct enrollment institution like St. Andrews in Scotland, or a third-party facilitated program that may be in a place like Kigali, Rwanda, or Rabat, Morocco, or in locations in Copenhagen or Angers or in Toledo. The most important role that we have for students while they're at Notre Dame is to prepare them for their time abroad. And that doesn't happen through just reading. It happens through support in 4 important areas. And that is first, helping students make logistical arrangements. They need to know when the programs start and end so that they're able to purchase their tickets. We need to make sure that passports are current and that they are good for at least 6 months after their program ends, which is a legal requirement. We need to help them obtain visas, sometimes background checks. We also inform them about housing options, and each site has different housing options available. So we discuss all of those. And of course, logistics involves forms, and those forms can be anything from emergency contact information to health questionnaires to a plan of study while they're abroad. And that takes us into our next area, which is academics. In order to have a successful time abroad, you need to make sure you're aware of what courses are available and what's going to help you progress towards graduation back here. You need to understand the registration system and what requirements and expectations there are while you are abroad academically. We work with a lot of programs that have different credit systems, that have different grading systems, and those are the sort of information that we provide to students. We also talk about policies and procedures. All institutions have their own set of policies and procedures, when you can withdraw from a program, when you can withdraw from a class rather, when you need to submit things, how many classes you can miss. And there's an important constituency too for academic culture. We need to make sure that students understand that not all courses are taught the same way they are here at Notre Dame, that there are different kinds of courses, different styles of teaching, and different education systems. And so that's what we spend some time with. Of course, studying abroad means considering the different culture that you live in. We want to talk to students about what it's like to live abroad in the particular site that they're going to be going to. We want to prepare them for possible culture shock and strategies for adaptation. And we also need to make sure that they understand that the culture they're going to may have different ways of interpreting the way people dress, the way they act in public, and we spend a lot of time talking about just different gender considerations, particularly in some of the cultures where there are different roles circumscribed to women. Finally, and this is an area that is important to us, of great importance to all of us, and that is health and safety. We provide general and location-specific information that we get from the State Department and from local resources. We provide site handbooks, or our partners abroad provide the site handbook, which includes important information, including packing lists, what they need to know about the site that they're going to. And finally, important contact information. How do we get in touch in case of emergencies? For your consideration, I encourage you to encourage your student to look first to explore their program location. A semester seems like a long time, but it's not as long as you think. And the students need to take every opportunity to get to know their location well. We also want to remind you that personal and weekend travel can be expensive and it's potentially disruptive. We need to make sure that travel takes place when students have appropriate time and that the conditions will be safe for them. We also invite you to visit, but if you do visit, make sure that you coordinate it around your students' curriculum and that you're not interfering with their classes or exam period. And finally, we make sure that the students' passports are up to date, but if you are going to visit your student, and we encourage you to have a passport that enables you to visit your student in case of need or for your pleasure. And they too must expire at least 6 months after the planned travel dates. Finally, the important things that you want to keep in mind is that Notre Dame does not monitor or approve personal travel and activities while students are abroad. The weekends are oftentimes when students make personal decisions about where and when they travel. And so we invite them and encourage them to register their travel at our site. But if they don't, they should know that we won't be able to get in touch with them. We also want you to know that we support them, their health and their safety while they're abroad in coordination with all other resources. And the rest of our discussion with you today is going to talk about how we support them.
Great, thank you, Kathy. So as you'll hear throughout the rest of the discussion, we go through pretty great lengths to prepare the students for their time abroad, not only, as Kathy mentioned, from purely an academic and cultural perspective, but from a health and safety perspective. And this slide that we're looking at right now shows you the kind of network of support that the students have available to them. We emphasize to the students, though, as Kathy alluded to earlier, they make their own choices and they must take responsibility for their own health and safety. And so while we emphasize that level of responsibility, we do have resources that are available to them. I'll start at the bottom of the chart. If they are with a third party or a host institution in one of the programs that Kathy referred to, they have resources available to them from those institutions who have their own health and safety protocols. We want students to become familiar with local government resources, police force, government resources in the country in which they're studying. We also provide students with a comprehensive health insurance package, and if they haven't referenced HTH to you yet, you should ask them about HTH, because it is a great resource for anything from minor injuries to major illnesses, and the students are all enrolled in HTH insurance, and that is, again, comprehensive international medical coverage. Notre Dame has resources on campus and in certain of our locations, as we mentioned earlier, to help students with little things and big things that may arise. And in the event of an external crisis that may occur, natural disaster or any other type of event, we call on those resources to support the students as well. And not to leave out the role of parents, you are also a great resource for students. In fact, we expect students will go to parents first when there is an issue that involves their health or safety, and the parents may become good resources for us as well. So I would never leave out the parents in the circle of support that we offer students. And finally, we'll talk a little bit later about U.S. government resources. We have embassies and consulates and State Department resources both on the ground and over the internet that students can avail themselves of in terms of seeking assistance or simply letting individuals in the U.S. government know where they might be in the event of an emergency. And so this is the framework that we operate in when we're preparing students. We do host seminars for students every semester to support them and to give them a bit more information about safety considerations. And so I'll turn it now over to Susan Soyson to talk a little bit more about that.
So as Tom indicated in the model that he just discussed, this is a student-centered preparation. The list of topics that we discuss are basically depicted for you on this screen and are in the order of previous experiences that our students have reported. For example, mental health and anxiety is the most reported incident that your student may face. That might mean a very typical homesick for a couple of days, and a general anxiousness about, an impending commitment to a new culture. Or it might be something much more specific. So we talk about resources that are available from that entire array with the students and a thing that is available online to them. During the Safety Summit, we make a lot of overviews of the topics, which are presented by their peers. So typically we gather a student who has had an experience from a previous Notre Dame international education opportunity and ask them to share that experience with the students in the audience with sort of a learning outcome. And then we tell the students in the live summits, which are held at the end of the semester with the constant focus on finals coming for the student, that after finals are completed, go home and look at the resources more carefully and specifically to engage in conversations with their parents about how to combat certain elements that might be more of a challenge for them. So I'm going to cover just a couple of these specific topics. I would say the most important element of the student-parent role is the communication topic, and that actually is very specific to family communication. This year at the Student Safety Summit, we actually distributed a physical hard copy of an emergency card. The emergency card prototype is also available on our website, and it is linked to the parent checklist, which is also on the website. All of these links will be at the end of the frequently asked questions so that it will help you to navigate very specifically to those roles, but also reviewing the website in general will give you an understanding of some elements that might be helpful for the parent to take on in their communication role. Communication is often cited as the best overall prevention model. Many of our programs do have a dedicated emergency card that the students are actually distributed with very specific site information. But in general, a general format for a communication card would include the 911 equivalent in the area. I think an important distinction to have here, as Kathy indicated, that personal travel is a large part of the international experience for the Notre Dame students. So what we want them to do is recognize that they might have an emergency card while they are studying in London, which would have very great London resources. But if they're traveling to Spain for the weekend, let's have them look into the resources that might be in Spain so that they would have similar support in the event of an occurrence that they might need support in. The other element that Tom mentioned, actually, the HTH, is covered under our physical well-being and insurance. We do have an exceptional platinum level coverage now for undergraduates, and it is a required international health and mental health insurance program. It also happens to be our evacuation insurance in the event that the extreme situations, which are referenced over there, come to pass. Then we do have ways to help our students to return to a safe location. HTH has a lot of resources that can be very preventative oriented for students. And we talk about this a lot at the Student Safety Summits, but if your student in particular is on a prescription drug, it would be an excellent time before they travel to make sure that they have an appropriate plan for the use of their medications. And HTH does have a database that would help them to establish legalities in new areas. This is not often the obvious choice. For example, there's a lot of laws in what we would consider westernized nations that do not accept the normal medications that Americans have and FDA approved. So definitely if your children are taking drugs, I would have the conversation with them that they looked into the prescription validity and they have a plan for that. In rare cases, there are students that travel and think, oh, well, you know, I don't really need that medicine that my doctor prescribed, but we want to have the conversation that we want things to be as well prepared as possible. There is an HTH portion of the portal that is parent specific, and you can talk to your student about that. That would mean that you would be able to see the resources, but you would not be able to see the specific medical treatments that your student were engaged in. The extreme situations portion of the Student Safety Summit, I think, is a very important story. We actually have a student who was in the Paris stadium that was attacked in last November's situation, and she, in a very painstaking personal revelation, shares how she used really good response mechanisms that were sort of ingrained in her preparation. And now Tom is going to cover a couple of those, and specifically the preemptive ones, which the student relates to.
Thanks, Susan. So we do have some general guidelines for students in any situation. Susan alluded to a few of them already, but we want students in general to prepare and then respond when things happen. And so we have a few guidelines here we'll share with you as you speak with your students over the break and throughout the time of their study. We want them to plan ahead and be aware of local resources and current events. Things happen when they're abroad, and they can find out by watching local news, by going on the internet and finding out what's happening in a location they may be traveling to. Could be little things like civic disruptions, or major things like riots or other events that they might want to avoid. They should look at their local resources and also make sure that they look far enough out ahead so that they know what may be upcoming if they have a trip planned for weeks or months in advance. Susan also mentioned updating the contact information and making sure that if they have a new cell phone number, that it's appropriately shared with people who would need to know that. If they are in a location for a period of time on personal travel, that they share their contact information as well. Registering their travel plans, not only with Notre Dame, but also with the State Department, I think is key, because we do need to respond quickly in many situations, and knowing where students are, even generally that they are in a particular country or a region, is incredibly helpful when we're talking about minutes and hours when we need to get in touch with them. Along those lines, we want to make sure that students respond to confirmation requests. We often send multiple requests for student confirmation from different sources just to try and make sure we cover as many students as possible. So we want them to be attentive to when they may be receiving these requests, and then make sure that they respond quickly. Of course, we want them to stay calm and focused. I think in a lot of situations where there are external events, there's a tendency perhaps to panic, especially if you're in a large crowd. We want them to maintain their composure, keep in contact with their family if they haven't already done so, because we won't know if they've contacted you, your parents, or any of their siblings. And then lastly, be familiar with the U.S. government resources. There are incredible resources at the embassies and the consulates. And we also have the American Citizen Services that we provide information to the students about. So in the event of even just a simple situation such as a crime committed against them, they can go to the American Citizen Services and get resources that will help them just navigate how to respond in a foreign country.
You know, Tom, I did want to mention that American Citizen Services is sort of a misnomer. Because your student is engaged with the U.S. organization, even if your student is a non-U.S. citizen, you can engage with American Citizen Services on an information basis. So there is a limitation on what the American Citizen Services branch will provide if you are not American citizen, but you can actually get a lot of information from them just from their experiences there. So we do actually engage all students in the Smart Traveler Enrollment Program, regardless of their citizenship.
Excellent, great, thanks. So our role at Notre Dame, whether it's here or in our facilities abroad, is in situations where there is a crisis or there is some event that has taken place, we identify all the students who may be impacted by a particular event. We have a registry where we can quickly do a query that will search students in a particular region or a country. We contact the students through any number of mechanisms and ask them to confirm their location and their well-being. And in most cases, in fact, almost all cases, the vast majority of those students are fine and they don't need any assistance. But we do want to support those students who may need its assistance or advice on how to proceed in the event of an emergency or a crisis situation. We also are responsible for communicating internally the status of these students to our university officials. We have a much more broad emergency operations committee that would be called to respond if there were a large number of students impacted by a particular event. And so we keep the university officials apprised of the situation. And we have resources here on campus who have great contacts with U.S. government resources at home and abroad, with the FBI, with the State Department, or any other number of local police forces or security forces where we can call on them as needed if the situation warrants. And that, again, is a function of the nature of the event that may be occurring and also the manner in which our students may or may not be impacted. And then finally, your role as parents. Here we broadly state that your role is to support and share. You're supporting your students by reminding them of the expectations that they should do what we asked them to do 2 slides previously, which is to make sure their contact information is correct, register their travel, listen to us. If they're not going to listen to us, then listen to you as parents in terms of just saying, yes, I'm fine. I received your request and I'm fine. And also, as Susan mentioned, even though it's probably the last thing on students' minds, be familiar with HTH insurance. Events happen off hours, students are several time zones away, and if they find themselves in an emergency room with a broken leg, they should say, wait a second, there's something I heard, HTH, or they should be able to have their HTH information at least with them in their pocket or whatever they carry with them. Be familiar with and advise your student on their travel plans. This is something that's very relevant. Situations change even over the course of a semester. Students may be planning to go to a place that seems safe and harmless. Something may happen. You said, wait a second, I heard that they were planning to go to that country. Let me talk to them about where they're going and see if it's still safe. Just have a dialogue with them. They can obviously do whatever they want when they're abroad, but you should be familiar with that in the event that you're aware of something that you want them to know. And if all else fails and you can't get in touch with your student, contact us and we'll provide that information for you at the end of the slideshow if you learn of any issues with your students that you might be concerned about.
Okay, well, as Tom indicated, we are open for business and contact. So Notre Dame International does host a support line with the numbers at the bottom of the screen there, and it does take text, WhatsApp, WeChat, a Viper, any form of communication, which I think you should talk about with your student, what form of communication you are going to have. And then Notre Dame Security and Police does have a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week, 365-day-a-year line, which has a dispatch section. So basically that is an ability to triage if any call comes in and alludes to having an international implication in it, then they frequently will call the Notre Dame support line, or Tom or Kathy or any number of program directors if they have a specific guide. So that is also one of the interesting points that we have learned over the years on the parent communication. Know what program your student is affiliated with, because there's many programs that are in a given location. So if you just say, well, my child is in London, in the spring and fall semesters, there's a better chance that it's a Notre Dame International sponsored, but a lot of times over the course of the summer in particular, there's a lot of independent travelers. So if nothing else that you learn, know exactly what program your student is traveling under, so then we can get you to the resources as quickly as possible. So now we're going to talk about some of the questions that we received from parents. The frequently asked questions section of the website has been updated to include these and other questions that have been received from previous webinars. And also just some general information that we have learned that has been helpful to parents in the past. So one of the specific questions was about obtaining local currency. The overwhelming advice that I give to students immediately is go to a well-lit public area to obtain money, because that is actually the #1 threat. So ATMs have a good reported credit or transfer fee, and then also in some cases you can use a bank with about that. But we have to know the fees up front, right? Sadly, I will admit my child traveled on international occasion with a peer institution, not at Notre Dame. And so she got a credit card, which we had many international transaction fees on. And had we looked into that, that would not have been a logical choice. The other thing that we always advise students is to make sure you talk to the bank that hosts your travel cards, debit or credit cards, and make sure that they know that you're traveling abroad. We've had situations where students had not done that, and then when they got to the location, they were cut off because the bank didn't recognize that. Another thing that we talk sort of around this topic with the students about is to have a select option, like if you're going out for a day excursion or whatever, pick one card that you are expecting to use and bring that with you, and keep the rest of your resources back in your room in a safe location, so that in the event that something does happen to your wallet, which you may have noticed that theft was our second most frequent circumstance, then you have a response until your favored one comes to pass. What opportunities are there for personal travel? Well, we've talked about this a lot. So personal travel is the concept that you will go to a study abroad location and then go electively to other places. This is different than curricular travel, which in several of the programs you can go, for example, to take a class in the London program that will have an exposure. The class specifically will travel to Jerusalem or Brussels or something. This is a total option, an elective for the student. I would say that it is very site specific, but in the conversations that I've had with my children, and now the advisory council, which actually are the students that review the information that we share in the Student Safety Summit, I talk about going deep where your international location is. That makes it a lot less expensive for the student. It makes it a lot less of a conflict, honestly. We've had a lot of students we have a student that talked earlier this semester about, she was studying abroad in London, she went to Spain, and she lost her passport in Spain, which meant she missed classes. And the real woe in the story to her was that she spent all $1,200 of her money that she'd saved up for elective personal travel. I'm paying for a hotel, rebooking airfare, paying the fees to get the new passport, and then missed classes. So there's a lot to be said for staying in the location that you are. I mean, your student and you selected that location, I'm sure, for great learning outcomes. So that is a thought. The other thing is actually very specifically to talk about the travel plans.
Right.
Tom has a great story with his son, right, in Italy.
Well, he was looking to go to Istanbul, which is not very far from Rome, and we had talked about that in February, and it was, as you probably know, Turkey is not the most stable location, but Istanbul is Istanbul, and as we were just talking about it over a period of days, we said, well, let's keep an eye on this, and if something happens, change your plans. And certainly, of course, a couple of weeks into that, there was a major bombing at the most popular market for tourists in Istanbul. And we said, okay, well, that trip is off, which sounds like common sense, but the students are drawn to these places because they are great places to visit. And so you really do have to say, listen, let's use some common sense here and just put that one off for now. And there could be another time, some later point in your life, but it's a dangerous place right now.
Right. So using up-to-date information is very cool and very relevant. And having your student involved in the preparation that we talked about earlier, maybe using that guideline of the communication emergency card as sort of a go look at the State Department, then register for social media, would prompt the discussion that they would recognize that Istanbul has changed. A lot of Notre Dame experience, I think, is based on tradition. And traditionally, the students in Rome have gone to Istanbul, but we need to update that. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with the travel alert that's currently in Europe, and that's another source of conversation that you might want to have. We have a great preponderance of our students traveling in Europe on the international education programs, and we want them to make wise choices. Another element of the personal travel thing is have a discussion with your student about when you might want to visit them, because each one of them is there for academic purposes, right? That's what we want them to flourish there academically. So we want to make sure that if you are going to invest in the family, the time and energy to get to that location, that the student's available to you without putting the academic focus at risk. What are the best options for international calls, text, and data? This is a very common question that we receive, and really it is very situationally dependent on what cell phone provider you use. I would talk to your cell phone provider about options, and there's a great experience in deactivating phones and using the internet to use the apps approach, which we've listed several of the apps that our students have commonly used and, as we talked about, are available on the NDI emergency line.
Susan, one thing that's interesting about this, it is really the options available are also very location specific.
That is true.
You will have, it's not only location specific in terms of where the student is, but also what plan the student is on in the United States.
Yep.
And so it's something we can't give broad guidance around because it's such an individual choice, but the students will be given guidance when they arrive at their location as to some options that they may have. They may get it beforehand, but most of them get it on the ground. So as a parent, and I found this out last spring, it can be a little bit unnerving to not have certainty as to what your student's contact number is for a day or two. That may happen in some situations, but they will get a local cell number. They will tell you what their number is, and you'll be able to get in contact with them. But just be aware that it might be a bit of a lag in terms of when they hit the ground on the program site to when they actually get you their local cell number.
So I think that that's a really important distinction. I also do think that I would say it's a rare student who does not have a smartphone or a cell phone available now. So if you are going to rely on some form of communication on an app, it's really a good idea to download them both on your phone and the student's phone, or on your computer if that's the source you're going to use, and test the situation before they depart. So. Does Notre Dame limit or restrict personal travel? So this has been talked about quite a bit. Personal travel is an elective responsibility of the student. I would not say that there are restrictions other than the expectation is that you will, when there is a class, you attend class.
Right.
So again, going back to the reason why most of these students, why all of our students are engaging, is that there's an academic focus, and as Kathy mentioned, notably progress towards graduation.
Yes.
And I have a second semester senior upcoming, so I'm looking forward to my last payment to our competitive university.
Yes.
So.
Okay. So this is an important one as well. Parents have asked, how are we informed of a disruptive event while students are abroad? And we have to use judgment in some cases where we have to determine how disruptive is this event. We found out that events overseas get more press in the US than they actually do on the ground where the student might be. And so it may seem like a big deal. We look at a number of different sources. And if we need to contact parents based on our experience and based on the impact of the students, we'll do that, but we primarily work with the students. And as we mentioned a couple slides back, we ask that the students be diligent in contacting their parents just to let them know that they're okay and that there's, what they may have read about is not really as significant as it seems.
So I did also want to add to Tom's point. So we at Notre Dame International monitor 8 different data sources daily. Our prominent one is the US State Department, as we've talked all about, but we use a lot of insurance feeds, we use private service arrangements, and there is a group of 50 peer schools that have full-time international risk managers, which also have a really extensive database. So every day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, someone is monitoring that. And then in the event that there's a large scale incident, such as the travel alert that was recently issued for Europe, then there will be opportunities to view that in the news section of the Notre Dame International. But that practice is reserved for really large scale events. The travel alert really wasn't highlighting significantly different things other than emergency travel during the holiday period, but we decided to do that so that parents can look at as an example of where to seek information in the event that something has happened. Rarely do we significantly communicate with parents. Our goal is to talk to the student and then have the student confer information over to their family.
Okay, host families is another phenomena that we experience in some of our programs. Not all of our students obviously live with host families, but they do play a key role in emergency health and safety situations. They are, in a lot of ways, extensions of our program, and so that they have a role. They are contracted to provide a role, and even though the student is living with a family and maybe either by themselves or just with one other person, they do support the students and they are liaisons with our program directors, and so they do play a big role. They are not the caregivers, they're not the ones responsible for the students, but they obviously support them and the students spend quite a bit of time with them.
So there was a specific question about would it be possible to stay with the host family outside of the dates of the program. So Notre Dame International establishes the dates of the program, and these host families are contracted for that period. So we as an institution respect those dates. Right. So individual students have made arrangements, and again, that would be a conversation for you and your student to have. A lot of times that might be available with the coordination of the host on-site
right.
coordinators, and I did also want to mention that these host families are vetted.
Yeah.
So we
right.
do have a conversation with on-site staff members, whether they're third-party providers or a Notre Dame staff affiliate, and that they take a lot of care in selecting these families, and they're updated consistently. There are families that, for whatever reason, the circumstances have changed, and they're not offered the opportunity to continue. So that's a very important part of the educational community, and we really respect the role that family has.
Okay, well, that brings us to the end of the parent webinar. We do have we've referenced a few times our website, international.nd.edu. Please look at that as you're able over the holidays or while your student is abroad. It has a lot of information just for reference, but also for emergency situations. And certainly if you have any questions, you can email them to ndinternational@nd.edu, and we'll get back to those. We respond to those individually, so please feel free to ask questions as specifically as possible.
And don't forget to look at those frequently asked questions.
Yes, they are great, and they are sent in from people who have gone before you as parents. So it's things that people have asked before, and they're very helpful.
I would like to say that
Go ahead, please.
that the students can anticipate a safe and productive travel abroad, study abroad period. And I think that we are giving you all of this advice just because we think that it's going to be helpful for you, and hopefully will reassure you about the quality of care your student will get while abroad.
Great, thank you. Yes,
Thank you.
that is the primary message. Thank you
Right.
very much. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to engaging with your students in the coming semester.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry
That's
Christmas.
right.